While the president and congressional leaders continue their deadlock over what to do about the nation's debt, two senators are working on a bipartisan plan to cut $4 trillion over the next decade. We're joined by Virginia Democrat Mark Warner and Georgia Republican Saxby Chambliss. And Senators, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having us.
The key to your plan, you say, is that everybody's got to have some skin in the game. And for you as a Republican, Senator Chambliss, that means agreeing to the politically unpalatable increases in revenue. Are you willing to increase taxes?
Well, we can increase revenues without increasing taxes per se, Chris. And matter of fact, what our proposal does is to reduce the effective and direct tax rates all the way across the board. And we do that by making a significant reform in the tax code. And every time we've made a significant reform in the tax code, whether it was under Reagan in '86 or Bush in 2001, what we've seen is reduction in rates and increase in revenues.
What you're basically talking about is doing away with about $1 trillion in deductions that are currently in the tax system. But Grover Norquist, who's head of the conservative group Americans for Tax Reform, says what you're talking about means that you're still breaking your pledge, and he's obviously going to hold this against all Republicans who support it, breaking your pledge not to raise taxes.
Well, let me just say that we're joined on my side in these discussions by Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho. The three of us have just been designated by National Journal as three of the most, if not the most, conservative members of the United States Senate. We don't believe in raising taxes, but let me tell you, Chris, this is such a massive problem, as Senator McConnell just stated, a $14 trillion debt, that if we don't get our arms around it now, then we're going to become a second-tier nation, and we cannot allow that to happen. So it's imperative that we put everything on the table for discussion. I don't know where we're going to wind up. We're not there yet. But if you look at the Debt Commission report, you have to address spending. We have to reduce spending in a major way. You've got to address entitlements. We've got to reform entitlements in a major way. And you've got to look at revenue and reform our complicated tax code in a major way. And when you do that, everybody does have that skin in the game, and everybody gets their ox gored just a little bit.
All right. Well, let me bring in Senator Warner. For you as a Democrat, having skin in the game means that you have to take the politically unpalatable choice of cutting entitlements. As a Democrat, are you willing to scale back on benefits for Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid?
Well, you see, we have to do all of this because otherwise, if we focus the discussion as we have so far, the back and forth in the Congress, all you're cutting is 12% of the federal budget, the domestic discretionary spending. And you're seeing actually good programs perhaps being eliminated because you focus the discussion only in that area. You've got to put everything out. That means Saxby and I are probably going to take some arrows. He on the Republican side, maybe because we're willing to take on reforming some of these entitlement issues. But every day that we punt, every day that we don't act, we add $4 billion to our national debt. At some point, we're going to have to pay that back. So why not now go ahead and put a plan in place? We didn't get into this situation overnight. We're not going to dig out in a single year. But if we put a plan in place, I think the markets will respond. I actually think our economy will be better. But that's going to require a little give from both sides.
But the Democratic leader in the Senate, Harry Reid, said this recently. Social Security has contributed not a single penny to the deficit, so we can talk about entitlements as long as you eliminate Social Security from the discussion. First of all, isn't that wrong? Social Security is already paying out more than it takes in, and that's just going to get worse as the baby boomers retire. So isn't that, as a fact, wrong that it doesn't contribute to the deficit? And secondly, can Social Security really be off the table?
Well, Chris, until recently, Social Security has actually been running major surpluses. In effect, we've been borrowing from Social Security to finance the government. Now that's clicked over on an annual basis. As you said, we're paying out more than we're taking in. What our proposal puts out is not taking Social Security proceeds any longer and paying off the deficit. It's saying, let's make sure Social Security is solvent for the next 75 years.
But you're also talking about, for instance, raising retirement age.
Well, my sense is, remember Social Security was put in place back in the 30s. They set 65 as the the period to start because life expectancy was 64. Now Americans, thank goodness, are living towards closer to age 80. And the idea that we're going to slowly raise the retirement age a couple of years over the next 40 years, nobody, you, me, Saxby, that we're not going to be affected at all. Folks under 35 might see a slight bump in their age increase, but frankly, a lot of folks under 35 don't think there's even going to be Social Security if we don't do something in that.
Senator Chambliss, how close are you to an actual comprehensive plan? There's talk that what you're thinking about is that you would, instead of specific proposals, that you would come up with targets for spending, for revenue, for entitlements, and that if they are not met by subsequent Congresses, there would be automatic triggers to cut spending or to increase revenue. Is that where you're headed?
Well, Chris, first of all, what we've got to do is when we see an increase in revenues coming into Washington, we got to make sure that Congress doesn't have the ability to spend that, because history dictates to us that if we have revenues coming in that are uncontrolled, that's what's going to happen. What we've got to make sure of, and frankly one of the major issues that we are dialoguing about in our group now, is what do we do with those revenues? We need to make sure that we commit the most significant part of those revenues to tax reduction, tax rate reduction, get our corporate rate down to where we're competitive in the world marketplace, get our individual rates down to where people actually do pay less in taxes. And if you're one of the 70% that don't itemize, you will certainly pay a significant amount less in taxes. And then we've got to take a portion of that. The Debt Commission said somewhere between 20%, 15%, 10%, and apply it to this $14 trillion debt. Otherwise, if we don't commit some of it to that, we're going to be stuck with this $14 trillion debt, and it's only going to increase, and that's not right.
So, Senator Warner, how close are you to an actual plan? And, for instance, because we were talking about it a lot with Senator McConnell, will you offer it as part of the debate over raising the debt limit in the next couple of months?
Listen, I think we want to make sure we get it right more than some arbitrary timeline. I really think I want to commend Saxby Chambliss. He's been a great partner. We've been saying, listen, we got to do this. We shouldn't allow this work of the Deficit Commission, the so-called Simpson-Bowles Commission, to go for naught. We're willing to kind of link arms, and we've got these other colleagues who are working with us. I think you're seeing a whole lot of other members in both parties say, we need this long-term solution. I get a little worried when you start tying it to the debt limit vote, because as Chairman Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve said, if we play Russian roulette with that, with the instability in the financial markets, if we were to default on America's obligation to pay, you could end up seeing us back in a financial crisis the way we were in 2008.
But are we talking about something this year, next year?
If we get into next year, you're into the presidential year, and this whole issue will probably be punted until 2013. We may not have that long a time before the financial markets say we're going to either no longer want to buy American debt or charge such a higher interest rate on it that it would have a dramatic negative effect on the economy.
Senator Chambliss, we have less than a minute left. I want to ask you, because obviously one of the questions is whatever you guys come up with, you got to sell it to Congress. You're one of Speaker Boehner's closest friends, I know, here in town. Would he back a compromise that included any revenue increases, and do you think his Tea Party freshman would?
Well, I think it's a matter of not a matter of is it going to get done, are they going to back it? It's a question of whether we do it on our terms. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to have within the discussion, within the room, a discussion between the White House and House Republicans and Democrats. John Boehner's a great leader. John Boehner is about the business of bringing our physical house back in order. He gets it. So I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to develop a plan that we've got to develop a plan that does fit within the parameters of the House Republicans and Democrats, as well as Senate Republicans, Democrats, and the White House.
Well, on that optimistic note, we're going to leave it there. Senator Chambliss, Senator Warner, we want to thank you both so much for coming in, and we'll stay on top of this plan. Good luck.